All right. Hello, everybody. I am Alex, and I'm here with Rich, and we are the Transformation Weight Control Podcast. And today we don't have a guest, so it's just us catching up and talking about some weight loss methods and tricks and exercise.
Yeah, we can go on and on, Alex and I. So we are going to be disciplined and we are going to watch the clock so that we don't take up too much of your time unless you're going for a really long drive or have a lot to clean up in your home. And then we'll accommodate you. But otherwise, we'll try to keep it a little shorter because
We'll try to keep it to an hour or
we
less.
do have a lot. We have a lot to say. We have a lot.
We do. We just spent 20 minutes or so
Yeah.
just chatting, which could have been part of this
You
podcast.
should have just turned it on. Exactly. That's right. Just a quick reminder, the reason for these podcasts is to give you the most up-to-date information, evidence-based, research-based. For 25 years, I worked at a research center. We did a lot of research. I know a lot of researchers still, and they're going to be on. And these are people who are real experts. And we have coming up
Yeah, we have
one of
some
our
nice
guys.
guests coming up. Why don't you talk a
Yes.
little bit about who's coming?
Yeah. In a week, we have one of the program participants, transformation weight control participants who did start the weight loss medication. So we will be talking about those, but we're going to do more than that. It's going to be like Anna's journey before meds and after. And she's really insightful, articulate, really smart, successful woman. And she has really struggled. So I want people to really get a sense. You'll relate to it if you struggled with this yourself. So she really struggled, but hung in there. And now her life has been altered by these meds, and it's very exciting listening to her and talking to her. So we're going to do that. Then we have one of our dietitians, Casey, who I work with directly, and she's fantastic. When I interviewed her, she blew me away. And then when I talked to her reference, we talked for half an hour. I thought I was talking to her mother because the reference was so she just kept going on and on about her. I really did start thinking this must be her mother, and she faked me out. But no, so she runs the weight loss medication support group with me, and she's become a real expert. She knows how to counsel people on what to eat to reduce side effects and so forth. So we're going to have a lot of conversations. She has a broad range. Then we're going to have another participant in the program who has reached what we call a set point. And for those who don't know what a set point is, the set point is a biologically determined body weight where you really don't go lower than that. And we all have that. Mark, he's transformed his life in an unbelievable way, truthfully. I've known him a very long time. He had a lot of problems, troubles with his weight, his back, everything. And if you go to our website and you look at the before and after, he's on there with the medicine ball, and he's the guy at the pool slamming the medicine ball down. This guy has transformed his life, and he's fantastic. We're going to talk with him, what keeps him going, and I think there'll be a lot of insight to that.
Yeah, I'm
Then
looking forward to that. Just a
yeah,
quick question. You just said something about a set weight, was it?
set point. Yeah. So the set point, so this has been known for quite some time, the set point, and it's in our program, in the older program, when we were still at the hospital. We have people who started very heavy and they never got to the set point in the 26-week or 52-week program because they really had more weight to lose than that. But once they continued, they did get to the set point. And the set point is a place where you just won't go below. That's it. And there's no formula for calculating this. I've been doing this almost 45 years, and I can speak with someone. And after talking with them for a little bit, I can determine if they're at a set point or not. And I consider their age, their sex, their history of weight, and just where they are and whether it's really practical to think about losing any more weight. And in many cases, it isn't. They're like, some people still want a little extra. And I say, okay, but what we do is we shift the attention from the scale to body composition, to how much muscle you have, how much body fat you have, because the scale is going to move a little. When you get to that set point area, it's not as exciting any longer because the weight's just not coming off the same. And so we're
Yes.
talking more about sustaining the weight. So I shift the attention towards shaping your physique, getting stronger. If haven't been really doing a lot of strength training and you lost a lot of weight, you could lose up to 35% of your weight from muscle. And that is not helpful because it slows your metabolic rate down, decreases your strength. And on a cellular level, it changes things, fancy things like GLUT4 transporters, which help glucose move into the cell for fuel. And it slows down the production of mitochondria, which burns all your fat. And so there are a lot of cellular things that happen too when you lose muscle. And then typically people who have lower muscle mass tend to burn fewer calories all day. They tend to fidget less. They tend to not move as much. So it's really important that we do strength training. We did a study at our lab many years ago, and we had three groups. We had a group that did diet only for losing weight. Then we had a group that was on the same diet, but we had them do aerobic exercise 3 times a week with an instructor. And then we had another group strength train 3 times a week. And we measured them with something called underwater weighing to measure their body fat, which is it's a tank of water. And they actually, it's cool in a way. It's what we always used in graduate school because it was state of the art at the time. But they would sit on if you go to the butcher, he's got like this scale and he puts the food on. That's what this looks like. There's a scale above a tank of water and you sit on this thing and it weighs you. And then you go under the water and you exhale all the air so that you're not buoyant at all. And then there's some calculations you make, and that's how you measure body fat. So that's how we measured it in that study. And what we found was that people who did no exercise and just diet, everybody lost on average, about 20 pounds, 18 to 20 weeks. But the people who didn't do any exercise lost almost 29% of their weight from muscle. That's a lot. And the people who
That's a lot.
that's a lot. That's a lot, really. And then people who did strength training only lost 8%. And I want to tell you that even though they still lost some muscle, I believe, and this has been confirmed, but they lost weight quickly. Like when you do studies, you want to make sure you're going to get the result. So it's not that you cheat, but you really are very aggressive with the intervention. We watch them carefully. We put them on specific calorie diets and we got the weight loss we wanted, which is what we were looking to do. But we preserved a lot of muscle. They only lost 8%. And if you are losing weight at a rate of 1 to 2 pounds a week and you're strength training, you're going to gain muscle as a percent of your total body weight, partly because you're not going to lose very much muscle, if at all, and you weigh less. So if you weigh less and you keep the muscle, then automatically, if you understand the math a little bit, you have the same amount of muscle, but less weight. So you have a higher percent of muscle. So that's really very helpful. So that's what we found. So this is really important. And when people are taking like the new medications and things, and rightfully so, be concerned about too much muscle loss. In our program, in our medication group, we really spend a lot of time talking about that, and lifestyle changes are really important. So the set point gets to the place where you're not going to lose more, and you need to shift the attention from the scale to how much the body composition, and shape your physique and build your muscle and so forth.
So just to bring back the original topic of Mark and what you said about the set point, I think that I might be reaching that point for me.
I think, Alex, I don't think you're quite at the set point yet, but you're certainly on a plateau.
Okay.
And we'd have to dig into that a little more to figure it out, but you're close to your set point. I think
Right.
you're close. Do you know
But
what
ultimately, I would like to get to 8 or 9% or maybe 10% body fat.
Keep in mind that set
Which I know
point
is
is different
difficult.
than body fat. So
Yeah.
you could weigh exactly what you weigh and change the whole body composition thing. Like you are a ferocious exerciser. This guy, for those listening at home, this guy, he really is a ferocious exerciser. One day he did a half marathon in the morning, and then just to cap it off later in the day, he did a 10K. Like he's madness. When I first met him, like 20 plus years ago, the guy was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
I came
Now
in
he's
first, by
vegan.
the way, on that
What?
10K. I think it was a 5K, though. I don't think it was a 10K.
I was a five.
I'm not
Well,
that
10K
great.
sounds better though. We'll make it
The
official.
10K does sound better, but
It sounds better.
I think it was a 5K, and I did come first in my age group.
That's it's actually interesting because, and then we'll get back to the topic, but when I was in graduate school, I went to school in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia had huge amounts of races every weekend. And what I realized when I started running really long distances and marathons, because I was always a very competitive athlete, I was all-American fencer, I was very competitive. But the thing about running for me was that I knew I couldn't win because I just was not fast enough. These guys are running almost twice as fast as me. I'm clunking along. I could go for a long time, but so it took all the pressure off, all the competitive pressure off. And I just competed with myself. And that was such a relief. And it was really terrific. Anyway, getting back to you and set point and so forth and body composition, I think you probably could lose a little more weight, but then
I feel like I
shifting,
have a lot more to go.
I know. What's the BMI? Do you know what your BMI is off the top of your
I
head?
think it's 29.
See, here's the thing. We don't, people listening at home, BMI is body mass index. It's a ratio of your weight to your height. And there are problems with body mass index. And this is well described. Everybody knows it, that you can have somebody, it categorizes people. So I hate the terms, but they use normal weight, and then they use overweight, and then they use obesity, and then super obesity. I don't like any of the terms. But anyway, so 30 is the cut point. Above 30, 30 and above, and you're considered to be in the obese category. So Alex is trying something. So he's below that. He's in the overweight category, which most Americans are at least that. 110 million Americans are at least that, and 30 some percent are above even that. But the evidence is that if you're physically fit, and let's say you have a BMI of 28, so 25 is the cut point for normal weight. But here's the thing. If you have a BMI of 28, and keep this in mind, it's about 6 pounds for each BMI point. So in other words, if you look between a BMI of 25, and again, this is a ratio of your weight to your height. So if you have a BMI of 25 and a BMI of 28, that's 3 BMI points or 18 pounds. So if you wanted to get down from 28 to 25, you'd need to lose around 18 pounds. But here's the thing. If you have a BMI of 28 and you're physically fit and you go to the doctor and you have all your labs done and everything, and you're healthy, then you're healthy. And the fitness is a part of that. So you may want to lose more, but then you want to ask yourself, like, number one, when's the last time you were at that weight? And people will tell me when I ask them, they say, oh, 30 years ago. Now you're 60. You're talking about being away when you were 30. Does that sound realistic to you? And maybe we start to shift your attention a little bit towards more body composition. Just getting back to the BMI for one moment, you could have somebody with a high BMI in the obesity category, but in fact, they have 8% body fat. And so they don't have obesity because it's their weight. They're heavy because they're muscular. When I was lifting really heavy, I was in the obese category, but my body fat was like 11%. So it doesn't always work so well. And there's an effort to try to move away from BMI, but I don't think that's ever going to happen in this generation. I think we're going to have to teach new doctors about the new BMI and what that means, because I don't think the current medical field is going to accept this. So anyway, when we get to that kind of set point, I have a good clinical feel for when people are, because I've seen so many people in 45 years and I know how far they can go. The medications are bringing people to a new set point, the new normal, which is lower, but that's another story. So for Alex, I know he wants to lose more. I would say an initial goal would be another maybe 6 to 10 pounds, and then really work on shifting that body composition. And another thing about body composition and body fat in particular is that you can go online and say, what should my body fat be? I got news for you. We don't know what your body fat should be. And I know there are lots of graphs and there are lots of charts and tables and everything, but I am telling you that there is no evidence that a specific body fat is associated with a specific amount of health. Because even in our own program, I've done this analysis many times. We have people who have high BMIs and they're perfectly healthy. They don't take any weight. They don't take medication. blood pressure is normal, everything's body fat itself. We used to measure their body fat in different ways. We used something called a 3D scanner. We used all these sophisticated methods because we were in a research center. There, you couldn't make any associations between how much body fat they had and their health. And nobody has ever published this, ever. If you go on a website and you find a BMI table, look for the source of their data. Look for the source of where they came up with that table. And I'm telling you that you are not going to find anything because, and every table is a little different. So it's nice to use it as a metric to say, look, I was 15% body fat and now I'm 12. That's great. I improved. And I'm okay with that. But I can't tell you that 15% is not as healthy as 12%. Because I could have somebody with 25% body fat and they could be healthier than somebody who has 12% body fat. So if you do have it in your head that you want to be a certain percent body fat, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's just, you do need to understand that it's, in terms of health, it's not meaningful really.
Yeah,
And
that makes
we're at the research center. Everybody always wanted our patients in the program. They always wanted them to measure body fat. And I said, but then they're going to come to me and they're going to say, what should it be? And I don't know the answer, and nobody does. And one of our podcast guests is going to be Dr. Dimpna Gallagher. She is the world's expert. We haven't determined her date yet. She's traveling. She's writing a grant actually for the research center. So after June, but she's the world's expert on body composition. And we will be talking a lot about that. She wrote the last paper many years ago about this, and nobody has followed through. So she'll be able to talk about that in detail, and we will do that. But
that'll be pretty interesting.
it'll be she's very smart. She's great. We've known each other a very long time. That will be a really wonderful podcast. So I think when you're talking about body fat, it's okay to do, and it's okay to want lower body fat. Just know that you can be healthy truthfully, almost at any body fat. And so you want to think about, what is it you want to accomplish? Do you want to shape your physique? And does that include reducing your body fat because maybe you don't like the way your physique looks because there's too much fat or something? I get it. That's fair. So then you got to exercise enough and reduce calories enough that you burn fat, that you consume fewer calories than you burn, and then you will reduce fat. Because the way that you lose weight, there are two main, we lose muscle and we lose fat. And there's lean tissue also, which is tissue around organs, but mostly skeletal muscle and fat when you lose weight. So in order to lose body fat, think about your fat cells like balloons, and they're filled with fat. And the type of fat they're filled with is something called triglyceride, which you've seen on your lab tests. They measure that. Triglycerides are simply 3 strands of fat and attached with something called glycerol, which is, we call it the backbones. It holds the 3 fats together. And that's about 97% of the fat you eat. So when you go to the doctor and you have your blood test done and they look at triglycerides, that's the fat you've eaten. And so it gets stored in a fat cell. And the fat cell, the fancy name is adipocyte. And the fat cell can only get so large, 2 microns, which is very tiny. But once it fills to that level, it can't get any bigger. And you don't get more fat cells. What happens is that one fat cell stimulates what we call an immature fat cell adjacent to it, a baby fat cell, a small fat cell. And that one starts to grow. And so then that gets bigger, and then the others get bigger. And that's how, and so the reverse, where the fat cell releases the fat into the blood for burning, and I'll explain that. That's how you lose weight. So for instance, let's say that you eat 1,500 calories and you burn 2,000 calories, you're going to lose 500 calories that day. And if you do that for 7 days, that's 3,500 calories, which is 1 pound. And what has happened biologically is that the fat cell has, because you're putting a deficit, so the body needs more fuel. So the fat cell releases the fat, breaks it down, it releases it into the blood, and then it can go several places. It can go to your heart and clog up your arteries. It can go to your liver, give you fatty liver, or it can go to your muscle where you burn it up for fuel. And that's the ideal place for it to go. Otherwise, it goes back to the fat cell. So once that fat gets into the muscle, it's like a car engine that burns gasoline. Your muscle burns fat and it burns carbohydrate. And the carbohydrate is broken down into glucose or sugar. So the muscles, this big engine is burning fat and burning carbohydrate. When the fat cell releases the fat for fuel for the muscle, it shrinks. And that's how you lose weight. So if you want to get your percent fat down, exercise can really help with that, particularly when you get to the weight where you're at the place where you want to really change your percent body fat because you've already lost a lot of weight. In the beginning, exercise helps, but it's not as noticeable. And you don't lose a lot of weight with exercise, but you can change your body composition with the exercise. And that's where it really plays a good role. And it's a really good predictor of keeping your weight off. Exercise. In other words, if you have two groups, one group, you get everybody to lose weight, and then you assign exercise to one group and no exercise to the other, the people who exercise are going to have a much more likelihood of keeping their weight off because of just described.
So for me, I started the strength training last January or February of not this year, but last year.
Right.
I think it was February. And I basically said, I'm just going to stick with it. And I hated it. I hated it.
I know you did. Yeah.
But the reason why I did it was primarily because I figured, okay, if I gain muscle, then I can eat more because I like to eat. I like to eat. So by the time I think from February through June was like my first kind of big epiphany. And I remember going to getting a DEXA scan, and the DEXA scan showed that I didn't lose not like a single pound of weight. So from a weight perspective, I stayed exactly the same. I think it was like 250 or 255, something like that. But I gained 7 pounds of muscle and reduced the fat. So I also know that muscle weighs more, which is where now I'm struggling with the scale because I am hitting the strength training 4 or 5 times a week, and I started a pretty intense program. I run also 4 times a week. Now I walk with 40 pounds of weight on me. In addition to that, I'm afraid of the scale because the scale says you're either staying the same or gaining weight. And at the same time, I feel like it's not, which is why I'm concentrating on the body fat percentage.
Well,
Like,
good.
I
Right.
need a goal to go for, and that seems to be the thing to shoot
So
for.
you said a few important things. Focusing, you gain 7 pounds of muscle is what the DEXA scan, for those who are listening, is it's an MRI kind of, but it's X-ray. So it's different. And we use it for bone density studies a lot. And it also can compartmentalize your muscle and your fat and where your fat is and so forth. It's a very sophisticated test. And so if it said that Alex gained 7 pounds of muscle, then he gained 7 pounds of muscle. If I could wave my hand over you and say, listen, I'm going to give you 5 pounds or 7 pounds of muscle, you're going to weigh more, but you're going to have more muscle, you'd be foolish not to take it. Because
Yeah, I would take that in a second, but that's why I don't look at that. I don't say I don't look at it. I'm afraid to look at the scale at this point because
then
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Then don't. Or we like to say, you
I
get
I can't gauge my progress that way.
but you can measure just your body fat. You have a
Now,
not with the DEXA, but you have a withing scale.
yeah, but it's ridiculously inaccurate. The DEXA scan. So the other
No,
big
the DEXA
thing was
scan-
most recently, I think I had 7 pounds of visceral fat, and that got cut down to about 3 in the last DEXA scan.
What the DEXA told you had 7 pounds of visceral fat, really?
Originally,
Oh yeah, because
I've been carrying it around for some time, and now I'm down to 3.
Yeah, because visceral fat, folks at home, is the dangerous fat that surrounds your organs. You could lose 2 pounds of visceral fat and it wouldn't change 1 inch on your waist because it's a small compartment. But it's responsible for all the metabolic problems, diabetes, liver disease, everything, because it infiltrates the organs. And so it's deeper in the gut. The fat below your skin is called subcutaneous fat. That's not so dangerous for you health-wise. It's the visceral fat. But to hear that, I don't remember seeing that in your report, but to say that you have 7 pounds of visceral fat is a lot of visceral fat because that is a small compartment of fat. So getting it down to 3, you said, that's tremendous because it's going to lower your blood pressure, lower your blood sugar, smooth out your insulin response, everything. That makes you a lot healthier. And that's pretty great. You move along and the error on your scale you're at home is 3 to 5%. And you're right.
It's more than that because on my scale at home, it still says I have 5 pounds of visceral fat. Like it tracks that, the
Oh,
withing
no,
scale.
visceral fat. When we did studies, we would use the scale he's talking about is a bioelectric impedance scale. So what it does is it sends a signal up one leg. You stand on the thing barefoot, goes up one leg, comes down the other, and the impedance is the resistance to the flow of the signal, and that has
Yeah, the scale tracks it and it's usually wrong. And I look at the scale and I'm like, no, I just had a DEXA scan and it says something different.
it cannot do that. But we use BIA scales all the time in studies and got those studies published. It's a legitimate thing to do. There's error, but what we
As
always
long
say
as you're
is
consistent, you're seeing
exactly.
improvement, even though it's not accurate.
Even if it's not accurate, it's showing which direction. And that's important. So I'm not against them. And again, like I said, I mean, we've used them in very fancy studies. So because they're convenient, they're easy, they're cheap, you can bring them anywhere, they're portable. So we would do that all the time. So there's no problem with that. But you are correct that there's variability. Plus, there's no way it's measuring visceral. It's just that's off the chart. So anyway, so I guess the thing is, if you don't want to weigh, because the scale kind of bums you out or something, is what you're saying, I think, right? Yeah. Then leave it alone. Because first of all, Alex, your behaviors, your health behaviors are really good. I know you feel like you're in a slump and this and that. I get it. I know. But overall, you're a healthy guy. You're vegan. I know, but you're like,
Based on what? I mean, if you like last week or the week before, I remember you said, oh, you lost 50 pounds. Somebody who's trying to lose 80 would love to be in your spot. So that's true. But you also just said you're competing with yourself. So I don't care about the guy who needs to lose 80.
I'm on board. Before we came on the thing, what were you doing? What were you eating? You were
I
eating.
was eating Misfit bar.
Yeah, honestly, because Alex has this thing. He was saying, I forgot what word you were saying. You were like scavenging around or something. I said you were foraging, like you forage around your house and you're looking for something to eat, and you took care of the problem. Now you're having the bar, and that substitutes for the higher calorie, fattier, sugarier chocolate, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, I've converted some of the things that I really enjoy eating into more healthier options. So, for
Correct.
example, my need for chocolate or want for chocolate is now these Misfit bars, which have protein, they're vegan, and they have low sugar and they taste great. They
Right.
satisfy the sweet tooth.
So
Same thing with ice cream. I now take like a protein shake, a vegan protein shake. I freeze it. I run it through the Creamy, which is like a ninja device that creates ice cream, and I have ice cream, and it's good.
So you see, let's just talk about Alex as if he's not here for a moment. And let me just say to everybody listening, Alex has what's called a bad case of all or nothing thinking and perfectionistic thinking. He's got it bad. And we're going to pretend he's not listening and he's not here. And I'm going to talk about him like he's not here. This guy, he's so like perfectionistic. And one time when I congratulated him about how much weight he'd lost, he said, yeah, but I still have a long way to go. This is like the classic perfectionistic thinker. Like they never stop for a moment to congratulate themselves. And they deplete their energy with this. So that's Alex, but I still love him, Eddie, even though now I'll talk to him again.
Apply that to everything, though.
I know it's your personality. It's your personality. But I can tell you that when you apply it to this, to fitness and body weight, body fat and everything. It's a bad combination because the scale is really fickle as it is. You change weight 3 to 4 pounds every day practically, and you can get on that scale one day, and everybody at home has done this. You had a week where you're completely off the rails and you got on the scale and you lost weight. How the hell did that happen? Or you were on the rails all week, everything right on the money, right? And you gained weight. What did you learn from that? The only thing you can learn from that is the scale can lie. It's too sensitive to fluctuations that you have no control over. And often in our program, we ask people to weigh once a week on the day of their group session, but they can weigh as many times as they like. And I like people to weigh more than less, as long as the fluctuations from day to day don't make you crazy. Because if you can weigh more frequently, what ends up happening is you can read the patterns better. For instance, somebody steps on the scale, say their group is on a Tuesday night, and they step on Tuesday morning, and that's our protocol. And then they put it in our database, and I download it, and I look at it, and I send them an email. And if they weighed only once a week, we don't really know what they weighed yesterday or the day before, and they could have weighed less. If they weighed every day or 5 days, let's say, then we have a truer approximation of what your true weight is. And I will sometimes there are some people where I just take the lowest weight of the week and count that in my data, or I take an average of the week. And because there's so much fluctuation. And so when you're telling me right now that it's upsetting to get on the scale, I would say to you at this point, I'm good with that. I am good with that with you. But with other people, I think it keeps you on the dance floor. It keeps you focused. It has more meaning than just the number. When people define themselves as the number on the scale, we call it false equivalence. And it means that if you weigh yourself once a week, it's all week you're worrying about that one number and what is it going to be. It's a trap. It's a trap. So we call that a false equivalence because you define yourself like that. So that's why we want to avoid that kind of thing. So Alex is saying he doesn't want to weigh, and I'm on board with that. I wouldn't say that to everybody, but I'd say it to you because I know you and I know what you're doing. I know how much exercise you're doing. I know, and it's time to focus.
Even that kind of slowed down a little bit around here because
What? Yeah.
the running, for example,
Yeah.
it's hot out. It's
Well,
hot out.
it's hot.
I did go out, but I'm down to 4 days a week instead of 5. My pace is suffering a little bit. I was at a 9-minute per mile pace.
What's the temperature where you live now?
Right now, it's 98 degrees.
Yeah. The guy lives in the desert, folks. He lives in the desert, like really the desert. He lives outside Las Vegas in the desert. So it's 98 degrees there right now. I live in New York City. I don't know what the temperature is. I don't know if it says it on my computer or not, but
60s
it's
or
not 98.
70s, probably. Yeah.
But listen, this morning when I was biking, I think it was 55 or something like that. So he's 98. So he's complaining that he's going a little slower. See, this is what I mean. Let's talk about him again as if he's not here. This is the kind of thing that Alex does. Like the guy is committed to it. He's sticking with it. He's been consistent, and he's complaining because his pace slowed down because it's 98 degrees outside. No, Alex, really, stop it. Stop it.
The issue there is I'm wasting my time because at this point, yeah, I'm going out, I'm doing my 5 miles, but I'm not improving because like right now my pace is slow. Like I did hills today. So the hills, yeah, probably helped me. But
So you don't put 98 degrees into the equation. It doesn't matter what the temperature is what you're saying.
no, it's definitely part of the equation in the sense that I don't think I could have run faster than I did. But given that a month ago I was doing 2 to 3 minutes faster.
It's apples and oranges when it wasn't 98 degrees a month ago. And
Correct. It was in the
it's a false comparison. You're also guilty of something called confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is very common. And what it is, you have an idea or a thought, and you look for evidence to support your thought. Even if your thought isn't accurate, you look around and you try to find evidence to confirm it. So Alex is saying he's not getting better, his performance, blah, 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 blah. The thing is, he's comparing today, which is 98 degrees, to a month ago when it was 74 degrees or whatever it was. But he's but he's looking to that information to confirm what he thinks, which is that he's not improving. But it's just not true. 98 degrees is different than 74 degrees. You're going to go slower. There's just, your body just can't. But he looks and he makes a comparison to something that sets him up for failure or sets him up to think he's not as good as he is. But this is common. I like to pick on him, but a lot of people think like this. A lot of people do. Listen, seriously, he's comparing 98 degrees to 74 degrees. What do you think is going to happen? Be sensible. Think about it for a second. Everybody at home, think about, would you go faster in 98 degrees in the desert or 74? And there's your answer. But Alex has a really hard time, as do many people, looking at the real facts of the matter, the real facts, not what you think. Because what you think is not relevant. What you think is your opinion most of the time. And most of the time, your opinion is incorrect. And that's why sometimes I say in the group, I go, don't listen to anybody, including yourself. Only listen to me. Because I say that. Don't listen to anybody but me. Because his is a perfect example. If we didn't have the conversation, Alex would continue to think he's not getting better. But he's comparing 98 degrees to 74 degrees. And you can't make that comparison. It's setting yourself up to fail. And everybody at home can relate to this. I'm certain of it. Because it's the most insidious, meaning it's the most background thinking style that we have. And it sets people up for failure all the time because it's never enough. It's like I say, nobody ever feels as good about losing a pound as they feel bad about gaining a pound. You know, that's my quote. I made it up because I've been listening to all or nothing people thinking, all or nothing perfectionistic thinkers for 40 years, 44 years. And so this is classic. It just rings the bell in my head. And we don't give ourselves enough break. We don't have enough self-compassion. And we don't own our victories. Some woman, she wrote to me in her email, after I emailed, she wrote, help. First word in her email to me, help. She'd lost weight like 18 weeks in a row and she gained 2 ounces and she writes to me, help. I'm like, you're kidding. Help what? But that's the disease, truthfully. It is. This is like a disease. Having obesity, nobody woke up one day and said, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have trouble with my weight? No one ever did that. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not this, but it makes it harder when you think in this sort of all or nothing perfectionistic way. That's what makes it harder. If I go into a room, and this is really true, if I go into a room in our program and I say to people, I rate by a show of hands, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest you're working, how hard are you working toward your losing weight? And the people who raise their hand and say 10, in almost every case, they are losing less weight than the people who say they're working 5 on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the hardest. And why is that? And I have done this analysis, and it's because the people who are losing more weight and say it's only 5 is because they're not beating themselves up. When I did the analysis and I looked at the people who said 10 and weren't losing as much weight, you know what they were doing? They had a lot of all or nothing thinking. They had low self-compassion and very little resilience. So they were making it so much harder. And that's why they answered they're working harder than the people who are losing more weight. And it's really true. The most important factor in losing weight is resilience, bouncing back from adversity. And you can set yourself up for adversity in lots of different ways with your thoughts. There's also external factors that come into the picture. But if you can't, everybody's going to go off the rails. Everybody's going to make a mistake. If you can't recover, then you're not going to continue to lose weight. And in fact, probably most of you, this is a self-selected group of people who are listening to this, you've probably all had problems with your weight. And there have probably been times in your life where you have that weekend from hell and you weighed on Monday and you gained weight, and that cycled into the whole week of overeating, and then weeks, and then months, and then maybe even years. And 3 years later, you're 55 pounds heavier and you go, oh my God, what happened? You wake up and you think, and in our program, that's not what happens. Somebody has the weekend off the rails. On Monday, they're back because they're resilient, because we teach resilience. We teach you how to bounce back and not beat yourself up. It's really true. It's just really true. I know it from my observations, but I also know it because I proved it analysis. To compare 98 degrees to 74 is a mistake to say that you're not improving. Because the reality is, if you ran about the same amount of time, you actually performed better because it was 98 degrees. Because how did you run the same speed or close to it when it was 20 degrees cooler? You pushed. You did well, but you're seeing it as you're not getting better. And the other thing too is that there is a physiological limit for all of us with everything. So there's only so strong anybody's going to get. There's only so fast anybody's going to get. There's only so low a body fat that somebody's going to get. There are limits to everything. Your heart rate, everything is biologically driven, and there's a limit to how much any human body can do. That's it. It's different for each person, but you do really need to understand that you reach the threshold of your peak. And they're always afraid to accept the facts because they think if they accept the facts the way they are, they're not going to make any progress. Acceptance is a bad word because if you accept the conditions, then it means you've given up. This is the furthest thing from the truth. The acceptance means you accept how it is right now in the moment. You're not beating yourself up. You're taking a realistic appraisal of what the conditions are, and then you move forward like a scientist would. If every scientist in the world thought like this and their experiments failed, then we would have no science and we would have no discoveries because every time they failed, they would quit, right? We would have never gotten to the moon. How many times they must have done experiments to figure out how to get that rocket ship up? And if they had stopped every time, we would have never gone to the moon. So it's the same. It is the same. It's the same type of thinking. But I'm on board with you not looking at the scale for a little bit and
Okay.
on what you're doing, get stronger. And that's an objective metric. The device you're using, the machine, the tonal, is telling you how much you're lifting. And so
Yes.
it gives you an idea of you're getting stronger. And if you're getting stronger.
Yeah, I'm getting stronger. And I also, because I'm doing the same programs over and over again, I could see the same workout that I've done in the past and whether or not I've increased the weight and the time and everything else. So I do see those metrics improving.
So in other words, what you're saying is you're doing the same amount of work, but
It's heavier.
exactly. So that's progress.
Yes.
That's where your focus should be. That's what it is. And if you do that and you start not foraging around your home for everything you could possibly put in your mouth,
I still like that.
so does everybody. So does everybody. You think how easy it could be to go back to your old way, but you're not. You're not one of the people I worry about that's going to go back to their old way.
I don't know. Like you have more faith in me than I do.
I know, I understand, but that's my job. And I think what you're saying is very common. People are afraid and people say they're afraid. And I like to say, work on not being afraid that your weight could go back. Because if you do think that, your arousal is going to be very high. Your emotional arousal. You're going to be irrationally thinking. You're going to get all worked up. You're probably going to want to eat, things like that. I suggest that you say to yourself to have respect for the challenges of losing weight, but to not let them defeat you. Because number one, history doesn't predict what's going to happen. It can predict what's going to happen, but it doesn't determine what's going to happen in your history. It's really important to have that perspective that all is not lost, because otherwise you will run into troubles. When people say that they're afraid they're going to regain weight, I correct them. I correct the language, because if you say that to yourself, feel it. You're going to be afraid, and then you're going to be highly aroused, and you probably will not perform as well. There's a graph we use. It's called the Yerkes-Dodson. You can look it up. Yerkes-Dodson. There are two psychiatrists at the turn of the century from 1800s to the 1900s, and they came up with a graph, and it's the Yerkes-Dodson graph. And what it shows is that If you have high arousal, emotional arousal, you're very stressed, you're behind on your mortgage, you had a fight with your wife or your husband or whatever, your arousal is really high, your performance is not going to be very high, right? And if you're depressed or you're sad or your mood is down, you're also not going to perform as well. So you want to find the middle, the optimal performance, which means that you're not judging yourself, that you're accepting the conditions, but that you have respect for the challenges, but you're not letting them beat. And I've done a lot of mountain climbing, like real climbing with rope, axes, and everything. And if every time things got hard and I said, this is hard, it's too hard, then what am I doing on the mountain? Then go home.
Yeah, that's what the strength training experiment taught me. It's not comfortable. I don't like it. I like it, but I don't like it. I don't know if I can explain
Listen,
that.
this is not, I am interrupting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, and so that's why I do it.
Maybe. I think you're doing it because you want to take care of yourself. So say that.
I'd like to say I want to gain some muscle so I can eat more.
What's wrong with that? But what's wrong with that? That sounds
No, that's my goal.
but
Get
what's
the
wrong with
metabolism going so I can eat more. And you need more calories to support more muscle.
why are you beating yourself up for that approach?
I'm not complaining about my strength training. My running
No, I know you're
is
not. I know you're
suffering,
not.
but
But I'm talking about how you're framing it. That seems reasonable.
I mean, it's hard. Like I
Well,
had this week, I have 2 leg days, and these are brutal
I know what you
workout.
do. I know. Listen, Alex, if you go out and I say this to people all the time. I live in New York City. I live near Central Park. So I say to people, when we weren't online, the program's all online now. So we have people from Mexico and California, all over the place. But when we were still at the hospital, everybody lived in New York City. And I'd say, go into Central Park and watch a road race and look at the faces of all the people running, whether it's a 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon. Nobody's running. I'm having the greatest time of my life. That is not what's happening. And I happen to think Richard Simmons is actually terrific. But I would use the expression, this is not Richard Simmons' happy time. This is not necessarily about that. If your expectation is it's going to be a whole lot of fun, then just go home and dance because a lot of people like to dance. So turn on a YouTube video or music or whatever and dance around your apartment and you'll have fun. And that's great. But that's not going to give you what you want. So you want more muscle so you can eat more, so you have a higher metabolic rate. I'm on board. So there's nothing to judge about that comment. That
No, I'm okay with that. My one thing I would say I get about 30 to 45 minutes in of strength training, 5 days a week. I don't think that's enough, but
well, what do you think?
physically,
Now, like, what do you think? What do you think the average person does?
again, I'm not in competition with everybody else. It's just myself. But I've talked to other people. Like I have a friend, his name is Plant-Based Ben. That's what he goes
Okay.
online as. And he transformed himself at one point. And he was my coach at one point, and he would spend about 90 minutes to 2 hours in the gym working out. I don't have that kind of time or
Right.
the strength.
Right.
So I go through my program and I get my day done and I'm done. Maybe I have a second workout that's 10, 15 minutes on top of what I already did, but I can't get to that 2 hour level.
Okay. But how do you measure your progress?
That's a problem for me. I don't have good measurements other than the tonal telling me I'm getting better, showing me.
Why don't you have good measurements? If it's so important,
I wouldn't even know what they would be, right? Or short of a DEXA scan, I can't measure how much muscle I gained or lost.
no, I'm not talking about that right now, not the biology part so much, but just the performance, like the
Performance in
volume
terms of each workout,
the
the
volume.
volume.
That's how
Yeah,
for people at home, when you're talking about a strength training workout, you talk about volume and it's the number of repetitions times the number of sets times the weight. That's the
sure.
volume.
So
So,
today's workout was 17,000 pounds.
okay. And what was it the other day?
I had a leg day. It was more.
Okay. And what it'll be next week? Maybe it'll be more. And if you chart that, Alex is an IT guy. He knows how to use a spreadsheet. Put it in a
Yeah.
spreadsheet. And
I'm
And
I'm coming up on 4 million pounds.
but if you spoke to, and I'm not telling you to compare yourself now, but if you spoke to any professional athlete whose livelihood depends on their physicality, they would all tell you the same thing. They do not work out at they do not work out at 100% all the time. They can't.
See, that's what it's an athlete whose job it is to do this. I do think they go and they work out for 8 hours a day, don't they? It's
No,
their job.
no, they do not. No, they do not.
They
And
may
they
not
have
do the
something called
same exercise.
what?
They may not do the same exercise, but I'm sure the people that
They're not
competitively run marathons put in a lot of mileage.
marathon runners. The elite marathon runners are running 20 miles a day, 10 in the
Okay,
morning and 10 at
but
night.
they're probably also doing something strength training wise.
Not necessarily. That's not true.
So 20, okay, I guess if you're elite, 20 miles is 90.
It doesn't take very long. They can run exactly. They can run 10. They're running 12 miles per hour on the treadmill. 10 miles takes them less than an hour. So they're working out twice. It's working out 2 hours a day, something like that. But not all of them are lifting, and they don't really want to bulk up a lot because then they're going to weigh too much. These guys, they weigh 146 pounds, the ones who are winning. They can't afford to. And I remember when we were in graduate school, one of the things we did, the professor, he flashed pictures of different Olympic athletes, and we were supposed to guess what sport they played, and by just their physique. And it was easy. It was very easy to do. If you look at a heavy bodybuilder type guy and you look at a marathon runner, elite, it's easy to do. And a wrestler's going to look different than a soccer player. And we call that the phenotype, phenotype. It's how the organism looks. And everybody has their own phenotype. But for you, there's something called periodization. Have you ever heard of that? Periodization. Okay. So there's an author named Tudor, Tudor Bampa, for those who are interested in this. And periodization is a method of training, and it breaks your trainings into cycles, a macro cycle, which is large, and a micro cycle. And it looks like this. For instance, a practical example. Let's say you have a professional football and they don't win the Super Bowl, or they don't go to the Super Bowl. So after January, they gain weight, they slough off. But so this is their downtime a little bit. And some of them work out still, but others don't always. But what they know is when they get to training camp in August, they better be in shape. So they start training again in April or May or something. And it goes like this in cycles. And then during the season, those guys aren't lifting very heavy in the gym because they're beat up from the game. And they don't need to get stronger. They need to rest. So their heavy training is before the season. So that microcycle of the periodization is the growth and strength cycle. So the strength coaches are working really hard with them before the season starts. Through the summer, they're getting bigger and so they peak right before game one. And then they can't play a game, get beat up and then go all week working out real hard. So it's periodization, and that applies to the amateur athlete too. And you really got to think about that, because otherwise your body will break down. It will. It's just what bodies do. Remember, and I've said this to you a million times, your body grows during downtime, not while you're working out. You really need to remember that. And so you can push really hard, but you know what it's going to take? We don't pay attention to this in practicality. It takes 5 full days. If you look at like a biopsy of a muscle fiber after a hard workout, and the thing looks terrible. It's all fractured. It looks like a mess, right? And after 5 days, it looks good again. It's regenerating. But you work out before that 5 days. But this is why sometimes you take a week off and you're stronger when you come back, because you've let your body completely heal. But I'm not saying you should do that. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you do need to consider the fact that you are human and you have biological limits to how much you can do. You can't push 100% every work. It's not possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't work the same muscles every day. So every day it's a
I don't
different
recommend
group.
it.
And so to me, they get about 4 or 5 days of rest.
I recommend that sounds right. That sounds smart.
Except when I do 2 leg days in 1 week, like this week.
Sometimes. So, listen, when I had my physical therapy for my hip and then they told me to do 3 exercises and I went to the gym, I said, man, I went to the physical therapist. I said, man, my hip is really sore. She goes, what'd you do? And I gave her the list. I had 26 hip exercises and I did all of them. And she didn't even look up from the paper. She just looked up over her eyeglasses and looked at me and said, I told you to do 3. You did 26. And you're wondering why you're sore? I'm going to discharge you if you don't start paying attention to me. So I paid attention. But this is typical, right? We're all like, we get worries.
Is that a little bit of all or nothing thinking
A
there?
lot of it was like, nuts. I typed it all up. I was like, 26 exercises. She gave me 3. I'm human too. I make the same mistakes, but I learned. She yelled at me. And then that was that. And I listened because I needed somebody because I know what to do, but I wasn't doing what I knew was the right thing. But it's the all or nothing in us. We do, but it was a mistake. And you kind of want to sort of moderate that a little bit. And I do think comparing yourself to yourself and looking for personal bests is a really great thing. I did it all the time, as I said, when I was running in Philadelphia and I knew I could never win. The only person to compete against was me. And I would. And there were times where I ran faster than other times, and I would evaluate how come? How much sleep did I get last night? Have I been hydrated? What caused me to run slower this time than last? But I look at it like a scientist, and I don't beat myself up that I didn't do it. I'm just using it as information to make better decisions the next time. And when we teach people to step on the scale, we teach them to look at it as a scientist. I'm not saying that is easy by any stretch, but
No.
it's not. I get it. I know. But if you can, and the people who do really well do that, they look at it and they say, okay, I remember I hear Rich's voice in my head. He told me the scale fluctuates 3 to 4 pounds. It's like a random number generator. It's not really telling me accurate information. It's just not. And I'm just not going to let it beat me.
So really with the scale, you look for the downward trend overall. You're not looking at the actual weight. You're
No,
just and okay, that
because when I
I think I
graph
can handle
somebody's
that.
weight, when I graph somebody's weight, if I have daily weights, it looks like this. Now,
Yeah, that's what
that,
mine looks like.
there's 2 patterns that we see. Sawtooth, and it might be going down, right? Let's say you look at it over 4 to 6 weeks. It's
Yeah,
slow.
mine is sawtooth.
Sawtooth. The other pattern is what is called a staircase, where it goes, for those who are not watching video, so a sawtooth looks just like a sawtooth. It's sawtooth. And then there's like a staircase pattern where you go down and then it flattens out for a little bit. And then you go down again. So in the end, the graph looks like a staircase. It's flat, it's down, it's flat, and then it's down again, and then it's flat. So that's less common than the sawtooth, but that's how people lose weight. And even the person in our program who lost 112 and a half pounds in 52 weeks did not lose weight every week. We have in 25 years, we had one person lose weight every week. You just can't. It's just human. We just can't. We can't. And it's really important to remind people of that. There's one woman in the program, she's complaining, and she believed going in that people lose weight every week, until I straightened her out and said, no, what are you doing to yourself? You gained 3 ounces this week, literally 3 ounces. You got a digital scale with decimal points and you calculate it, it's 3 ounces. That's what you gained, and you're complaining. And if you breathe deeply, you could gain 3 ounces. So yeah, so we have to so my job, part of my job, I don't have it. I should really bring it next time. I have a little triangle and I ring that when people use language that makes me jump off the page and go, no, wait a second, stop. Like when they say, I'm going to try to walk this week. And I'm like, no, stop. You are not, no. What I want you to say is, I am going to walk 3 times this week, or I want to walk, but not I'm going to try, because try is a hedge. It's if you're going to buy a used car and you needed it by Monday and you talk to the guy, the salesman, and he says, I'm going to try to get it ready for you by Monday. How much confidence do you have in that? If he says, I will have it for you, I guarantee it, then you feel better. It's the same with human behavior. If you're walking around saying, I'm going to try, or I'm supposed to, or I have to, or I shouldn't, if you use that kind of language, all it is, it's like a restrictive type of rule. It just depletes you. Your brain's a muscle and it depletes your whole oomph, right? We don't talk about motivation in our program at all. We don't use the word ever. We use the word momentum. And this is how it works. Nobody wakes up one day, "Woo, I'm ready." That's really not how momentum works. The way it works is you set a plan, you follow through, and when you succeed, you build what we call self-efficacy, the belief that you can. And when you do that enough, the momentum follows you and keeps you moving. That's how this works. You don't chase it. It doesn't lead you. You lead it. And the way you do that is by setting goals that you can achieve and succeeding and not beating yourself up if you don't meet the goal. There are some perfectionistic thinkers who can set a goal that's outside the realm of anything that's possible. And if they don't achieve it, they're fine. There are a small percent of people who do that. But the majority of the
I
people,
all the time.
well, you beat yourself up when you don't achieve it. So we call that maladaptive. Adaptive perfectionists say, I'm going to shoot for the stars. If I don't make it, no big deal. But that's not what you would do. If you said you're going to shoot for the stars and you don't get to the stars, you're going to forage around your home for that you're going to beat yourself up and everything. That's different. Most people don't operate that they can shoot for the stars and be okay. But that's how we approach it. And that works. I'm telling you, it works. People feel a sense of relief and there's no more pressure. It's not restrictive because there's only one thing that happens when you restrict. You rebound.
That's something we have to tackle on another episode because right now I do measure some things. I log everything food wise.
Okay.
I allocate my calories, down to a T, and most of the days I hit it. Sometimes I don't, but I'm pretty careful. And I want to get out of that mode. I'm getting really tired of logging everything.
And I would say to you, if you were in a program, I would say to you, look, take a break from it. Nobody logs all the time. Who likes to do that? It's like a pain in the neck. So you take a break, you can always come back. The people who are sustaining weight loss, this is what they do. People who are successfully lost weight and are keeping it off. They don't keep track every day after they're done with when they get to their weight, but they have an alarm in their head. And if, let's say, their behavior starts to change, like suddenly they stop eating breakfast or they start to gain more than 5 pounds, an alarm goes off. And then you know what they do? They go back to counting calories or keeping track all the time. And they only need to do it for a week or two, and then they're back. But that's what the pros do. That's how people keep. Because who could possibly keep track every day of everything? Who would want to?
Me?
No, you don't.
No, I don't want to, but
No,
I
you
do.
don't. You don't have to do everything that you don't want to do, Alex. You like to white knuckle it. I know you do. But Alex, just because you don't want to doesn't mean you have to or that it's good for you. Sometimes you don't want to, and that's okay. And I would say, if you're tired of keeping track right now, Alex, tell me the truth. You don't know how many calories are in front of you when you eat something different every day of your life? Huh.
No, that's exactly it. At this point, I know what my calorie
Exactly.
intake
And
looks
most
like.
people, there are few people who eat different every day for a year. Most people eat. So once you do your due diligence and you've weighed and measured and you know what the food looks like and about how many calories, you'll remember it. And that's it. That's all you need right now.
That's a
Chill.
good point, actually. For whatever reason, I have not thought of that, but
Yeah, no, that's the case. No, nobody, 44 years I've been doing this. I don't know anybody who kept track every day.
44 years ago, nobody even had a phone to track anything. You'd have to
No,
do it on
that is
paper.
absolutely the case. We used You know what we used? Pencil and paper, if people can remember that. And you would write it, and then you would have to calculate it, and then you would put it on a scale and everything. Now we have all these apps and everything, but no, in the old days, and I believe, frankly, I do believe that writing things with your hand, I think someday somebody's going to come out with some research to show that when you write it with a hand instead of type it with your thumbs, that's going to imprint in your brain better.
I think that's real, and I do use an iPad with the pen. I
Okay,
do I
yeah,
do
so
write stuff
similar, too
down for
similar.
exactly that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah, no, we have people who still are just writing it by hand and things like that. And if I want it, I say, just take a picture of it and mail it to me and I'll look at it. And that's what we do because otherwise, who the hell wants to do it? So that's it. Alex, we are at 1 hour and 15 minutes.
But yeah, I was about to say if you had any parting words, and we didn't even cover all the topics we came up with before starting this episode. So
But this
we
is
definitely have a lot more to talk
this
about.
is you and me, Alex. This is how
This
we
can
are.
go on for hours.
We could go on for hours and hours. I hope people stayed interested. I hope you learned something. We're gonna at some point. Alex is the IT guy. He's figuring out a way that people are going to be able to communicate with it. How's it going to
Yeah,
work?
so a place for people to give us feedback as well as put questions up that we can answer on the podcast. In the meantime, I think it's worthwhile that if you do have a question, that you just email Rich directly at rich@transformationweightcontrol.com. Definitely the longest email address I've ever seen, but
Ever. Everybody said, Rich, you're making a mistake. I said, I know when I named the program, I kept thinking, what are the things I say the most? And transform. But transform wasn't available. So I had to make a transformation. So I understand it's long. Believe me, I'm the guy who has to type it the most. But anyway, yes, rich at transformationweightcontrol.com. Our website is transformationweightcontrol.com. Check out all our stuff. You can make an appointment with me for free. I'll be happy to talk to you if you have questions.
and you got the webinar coming up. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be the mindfulness, I believe.
Mindfulness on June 4th. That's next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time with our psychologist, Dr. Megan Petruka. She's brilliant at it, truthfully. We've done many mindfulness workshops and they're always a big hit. Mindfulness is very powerful. It's really good. And she's really good at it. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. And then a few of the other podcast guests I didn't mention earlier, Marie-Pierre St. Onge. She's one of the world's experts on sleep. She has done so much research on sleep and body weight. And the problem with the sleep research was that we learned a lot about the downside of not sleeping enough. 7 hours seemed to be about the right amount. So we knew all the hormonal changes, everything, but there was never really good solutions as to how. You could go to the National Sleep Foundation website and it's going to tell you, don't use your computer in bed, make sure it's dark, certain temperature, all the standard things. But she has started to do research on food to eat and sleep. And she actually wrote a book for the general population. And I think it's Eat Better, Sleep Better. I should know the name. I think it's Eat Better, Sleep Better. But her last name is Saint Onge, ST.ONGE, Marie Pierre. And it's on Amazon. I think it's Eat
Yeah, I'll
Better.
have to look it up, see if it's on Audible because I read while I
Yeah, I
run.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it is yet. But anyway, she's going to talk about that because she's shifted her research to how to eat to sleep better. And that's great because we don't have a lot of sleep intervention studies. We just don't. So anyway, she'll be there and her colleague Faris is going to come and he's going to talk about sleep and it's going to be great. They're all going to be really good. So that's it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. All right, Alex, as always.
Until next week.
Until next week. When next week, Anna and everybody, you really ought to tune in for that because you will be blown away by her. I am blown away every single email I get from her. She really remarkable. And she will give insight to you that you have never heard before. It'll be a great session. All right, Alex.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.